The reason I sought out Susan Stewart was her expertise is valuable here because energy storage it comes in different forms, and being from that we're based in the Shamokin, Pennsylvania area. You mentioned Centralia, Susan. Yeah, that of course Locust Ridge is where there's existing, I don't know, 20 to 30 wind turbines, I think, and large ones too. Mm-hmm. And although there is local opposition. Some, I don't know how strong it is, but I don't know what it's based on. I don't know if it's, I can see them, so I think I can hear them, you know, and it's something like that. But they're not tied in, Susan, with any kind of storage. The energy is generated, it's shipped away, it doesn't even go to anybody in the area. From our research, it goes to some, actually I don't know where it goes. But I would think it would be maybe a less controversial approach if people could see it and then know that the benefits are coming to them, and that it's going to also in some kind of energy storage. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so I appreciate that. All right, let's open it up to discussions, and keep in mind that Thomas Johansson is with us as well. Let's see, who would like to start with the questions? Back here? Okay. And Thomas, you're still hearing us, right?
Yeah, some 50, okay. 70% maybe.
Just to remind everyone, it's also like 10 o'clock at night for Thomas, right? Maybe 11, actually.
Thanks. Real quick question, actually more question about your pump storage for the mines, specifically quarries as well. I know we've been talking about coal mines, and in Pennsylvania, coal mines are built differently, anthracite, bituminous, and we don't have a lot of hard rock mines here, but we have a lot of quarries, notably that are very deep, full of water. Could you expand on like how that kind of system works, where you have like the high pressure fluid and what kind of stuff that does?
Thomas, I'll take this, and then if you want to chime in, you can. I don't know if you can hear me, Thomas.
Yeah, I can hear you, Tim.
I
missed the question, unfortunately, but I can hear you now.
So quarries, generally speaking right now, and again, not speaking on behalf of any particular company, what is happening is that the companies looking at these solutions are looking for the low-hanging fruit, the easiest landscapes where they can make the most money with the least investment. And quarries are particularly attractive because they are a reservoir that already exists that you then don't have to build. So the key question becomes, is there enough elevation change or head between the surrounding area around the quarry, either above or below, or underground if there's a mine nearby, where you can tap into that? And that's very basic math. That's part of the thing. You calculate the volume of water, you look at head, and then assume you're building another reservoir on an area. And one of the examples Thomas showed was 2 open pit mines that are analogous to a quarry. And there are some underground quarries, but also where was I going with that? Underground and quarries, and yes, if you are building a reservoir, and just like with any other abandoned mine land reclamation work, if you're trying to build that reservoir on unconsolidated mine waste, for example, that's a separate kind of complicated technical problem, right? But quarries are very attractive because they're half completed and easily available generally.
Okay, let's see.
I should also point out, I didn't mention in my talk, I forgot that on coal mining land, the one project that has come out of the Infrastructure Investment Act was Rye Development's project in Kentucky to build a closed loop pumped hydro system on a reclaimed coal lands in Kentucky. But it is entirely above ground, and they are constructing new reservoirs at 2 different elevations with liners, geotextile liners, and membranes in those reservoirs so that it will not interact with groundwater. But that's another kind of solution, and it's a low-hanging fruit, easy situation, so to speak. The engineering is very complicated, but it's 2 ponds on the surface interconnected with a dual-action turbine pump.
So I have a question based on what you were saying, Thomas, and you, Tim. that, or an early question that was raised before you came on, Thomas, was what about all the potential problem with scour of the turbulent flow and so on? And understandably, you know, if it's a softer rock mine, that's certainly a concern. But wouldn't one way around that be to, it's a matter of velocity of flow, but also volume, right, of water. And if you, rather than let it fall freely and not controlled flow, which is turbulent and destructive, what if you had a more controlled, slower flow with a lot of volume of water? And then, so obviously you don't generate as much power as quickly, but that would be a way around the damage that would be done. I don't know if that's...
A short answer to this, again, in a general sense, and again, Thomas, I'll take a stab and please step in. The water does not come rushing down the pipe. The water sits in the pipe all the time, and the turbine itself is always underwater. And so there's always a little bit of water in the lower reservoir and always a little bit in the upper reservoir. And what you're doing is you're moving water back and forth, and it can move quickly. So there is vibration, and there is a lot of rushing water, but it's not like a flood suddenly encountering this landscape, right? And I have learned a tremendous amount about hydropower in this project, and one of the things that is actually fairly obvious if you think about it, hydropower engineers already deal with sediment and materials in their flows. And they actually will design turbines specific to specific kinds of sediment problems and design the flows accordingly. So that's known engineering that just needs to be reapplied in this new environment.
I think if I may jump in, I think Tim, you're making an excellent answer to the questions. I don't need to add, but it's like you said. The beauty with the concept is that we're not inventing the technology itself. We're just putting it in a new context. So we're applying the engineering practices from hydropower. And just to give an example, typically the water velocity is in a range of 4 meters per second, and that's something that's a good velocity to avoid unnecessary turbulences and get the most out of the water flow. And then what might be added, normal operation, everything is smooth and steady, but then of course these kind of power plants, as well as hydropower plants, need to be also designed for the unexpected events. And that's what we also have to take care of. But again, we can look at the principles and the design philosophies from conventional hydropower and conventional pump storage facilities.
Okay, yeah, and it sounds as if it would be something that you could manage from an engineering point of view. It's not wildly abandoning flow of water. That's okay, got it. Okay, anybody else? I have a question. Oh, yes, go ahead.
So my question is about wind. I'm originally from Cambria County, so very familiar with those sites between Johnstown and Altoona on the ridgeline. Would you say, and this is, I have not lived in that area for 15 years now, but would you say that I remember when the windmills were moving in and people were excited and concerned about land grabs. It's also the shale boom. So do we go to wind? Do we stick with shale? All that stuff. But there was definitely development on the ridge lines pretty consistently of those turbines. Do you think that there's been a shift in wind policy in Pennsylvania away from wind? Or is it developing another part of the state? It just like in that region specifically, which you pointed to the really high wind speeds and the value of it in that area. Is it shifting out of that area? Kind of what's the statewide look on that?
That's a good question. It is on, yeah, okay. So we're actually at this interesting phase of wind development. So definitely there was a boom in, I don't know, like 2008, 2012 timeframe of wind. I think it got overshadowed for sure by Marcellus Shale as well as solar in more recent years. And we were really positioned very nicely in that 2008, 2012 timeframe with Gamesa, manufacturing blades and assembling in the state. And they went and kind of chased projects in the middle of the country where it's flat and you might have a uniform policy across the whole state. So I think the industry kind of shifted more so to the west, but there are still some companies very interested in Pennsylvania. And right now we're at that place where they're repowering projects. So they are, especially in that part of the state, they've added a couple of 6 megawatt machines on some sites where originally there were 2 megawatts. And it's funny, you drive by and if you didn't know that, you wouldn't necessarily notice, but I'm like super excited, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe those are 6 megawatt machines. But, and then they'll probably be, there's some other projects they might be actually reusing some of the components of the original turbines and putting new pieces on there. So it's not gone away, but it definitely got overshadowed, and I think a little bit stymied by not being able to work with the state of Pennsylvania to use some of the really great sites that the industry was identifying, getting turned down from that. But there are still several companies that work here. So it's not as sexy as some other things, and there's people that are, really just don't like anything changing, and that's definitely, education is that's why I do this, why I go out and talk about wind energy, because there's a lot of misunderstandings with it too.
Susan, the existing wind farm, I guess we'll call it that, from Centralia, starts about Centralia and goes up northeast, right, along the ridge, Locust Ridge. If, what's, in your experience, I mean, if, let's say, somehow there was approval to either add to it, extend it toward Shamokin, let's say, it's still along the ridge, because we could expand it that way. But, of course, local opposition is there, we know that. But would it be, I guess, from the practical standpoint, would that be more feasible to try to expand it? Or would it be to maybe argue to take over the existing wind turbines and adapt those for storage? How do we get to storage?
It depends on exactly how old that project is, but it might be an interesting space for either of those scenarios, possibly. And although when a lot of projects in the state were built, the trend was just to tie it into the grid. I would say storage across the whole country is much more prevalent of a concept. People don't just think of it as, oh, I'm just gonna, I just have to pay more. I don't want to do that. But now it's more of everybody's thinking of it as more of an integrated, whether it be battery storage or pumped hydro. I think it's a more common thing to happen today. So either way, if it was maybe an add-on or something that was directly tied to a project or even a brand new project, I think it would be something that, and I think the way that incentives work, that could all tie together really nicely.
I'll just make the side comment that, just a second, Chuck. I tried to pursue some of the producers of Gamesa, Hydropower. They're changing. I can't find them. And there's websites, but you call, nobody answers. I mean, it's a very hard industry to break into or to ask questions of, it seems. Is that?
Yeah, the companies have, combined. So now Gamesa is owned by Siemens, and there's Siemens Gamesa. I forget who Iberdrola is with now, but yeah, it's hard to, they change names, and the people who you have contacts with can change with time too. It is a little tricky.
Can I follow up, actually? Because one of the interesting things about talking about storage and wind or storage and solar, and it is a grid, right? And so one of the advantages of that is that you can co-locate them, and there are some efficiencies, but you can also stagger them in the grid in a particular way where you can actually solve transmission congestion problems, because the more electricity you pump through a line at one time, the less efficient it gets, so the more electricity you lose. which means that if you could transmit that electricity, you could capture the wind energy when the wind is blowing and then send that locally to a storage facility locally. You can then wait for a time when there's less congestion on the transmission lines to send that power and dispatch it to consumers. So that that kind of thing allows you to rework the entire system if you think about it as a system rather than this wind project and that storage project and this and that piece.
Yeah, and it's the integration. I think we're getting better at thinking along those lines. But also, I also failed to mention, I mean, generally, that not everywhere, but mostly there's more wind at night in a lot of places, which can complement really nicely. That's when, you know, you don't necessarily need the electricity as much, or, you know, you can think of it as complementing solar in that way, but if you can pump up your storage system at night and then your demand is during the day, there's usually a really nice complement there, although it does vary from location to location, but.
We'll just see if Thomas wants to join in, but no, I think Thomas is good. Okay.
I think Tim is doing a fantastic work in terms of describing those areas that typically I feel my strongest one. Like you mentioned the system aspects, and really that's what our study looked at, the system issue that is really on a society level, and then the challenge is who's paying for it so that we will all benefit from these all these renewables that are producing whenever they can. Because I think what's happening now, and I see in Northern Europe, we're talking about putting limitations on wind and solar so that they can look like a nuclear power plant or like a hydropower plant. And in my world, that's kind of stupid, because if you have made an investment in wind or solar, let it produce to the maximum every instance it can. And then the system itself should figure out how to solve those system issues. And that's the way the engineers did it when they developed the systems, the other electrical systems in the 50s and before that. But today, I think this has been a shock to the key players in the grid who have the responsibility for it here in Northern Europe, so that they try to, if I may be a little bit finger pointing here, they try to push that responsibility towards the newcomers in the grid. So I think we should lift ourselves to that system level and think what's best for all of us in the end. And I think large-scale energy storage in various parts of the grid is really valuable. And I think also the whole situation with Russia invading Ukraine is also making it quite obvious that we're all here in Europe now depending on having a secure infrastructure from an electrical point of view. And the Ukrainians are simply impressive in the way that they managed to keep their system. They used to be connected to the Russian system from a synchronous point of view, and they moved into the kind of Central European system in the middle of the war, and now they're able to manage that even though they are at the end of the system. So things can be done, and Baltic countries have done the same now, disconnected from Russia and connected to the Central European system. And I think Finland was a neighboring country to Russia. They've all been understood that they have a neighbor to be a little bit afraid of. But I have to say, as a 50% Swede, 50% Finnish genes, that the Swedish part of Sweden has not understood that threat to the same extent. But you can also look upon weather condition and weather disturbances that can actually also cause the electrical system to lose stability. And how do you restart a system if you don't have resources that have rotating mass like we with pump storage contribute to? So there's a lot of things from an infrastructure point of view and from a security point of view that becomes more and more obvious, I think.
Interesting. Thank you, Thomas.
Yeah, no, they just covered it.
Oh, I think you answered, Thomas, you answered the question that was about to be raised.
That's good.
Okay. Oh, yes.
Hi. Probably about 10 or 15 years ago, I was involved in a pump storage proposal in the Johnstown, Pennsylvania area, and it was going to be to build the storage facility up on top of near St. Michael's, Pennsylvania. And their pitch on it, and the reason I was involved, was they were going to use mine water as makeup water. And apparently they said they needed to have a lot of makeup water for this. And I was going to, we were going to treat the water and make it nice like that. Well, it didn't fly and never proceeded. And they were going to do it based on the differential between nighttime rates and daytime rates.
Yep, arbitrage.
Yeah. So it didn't fly, in part perhaps because they didn't do the research you did. Building a large lake above Johnstown has some historical issues in
There's
Pennsylvania.
precedent.
Okay. And that's,
Thomas, sorry, Thomas doesn't know the precedent, but yeah.
yeah, there's a problem with that idea. The second thing is I wonder what you think of, what kind of, if this was a feasible thing, we saw from the maps, there's lots of AML under areas that are high, and you not only could put wind farms, you could put lakes up there. Is the makeup needed? Is a mine water as a component of that a significant part?
Right, it is. The water quality is a great concern to everyone, no doubt. And the question of where the water comes from to operate the facility, and by the way, to build the facility, you've got to dewater the mine, right, to build the facility. So there are definitely water concern problems. We are, I think everyone in this room understands, we are very good at water treatment. We can do it. It's a question of figuring out who's going to pay for it, right? In this case, or in a general case, it's going to be very specific to a particular mine, a particular site, a particular body of water. So it's hard to give a general answer outside of the fact that it's not an engineering problem. It's a policy and economics problem, that particular thing.
But there are losses. This was not in the mine. This was two lakes.
Yeah.
One reservoir at the bottom, reservoir at the top.
Oh, so they were
And
going to use the mine
the
water
The
in the
idea
lake.
was to use the mine water as the makeup water, because
Yeah,
apparently there's a
I
lot of
see.
evaporation and
I
losses.
see. Yeah.
So,
Well, one of the advantages to mine storage is that there is no loss to evaporation because you're underground, right? But there will always be some discharge. Just because you'll have groundwater and there are other issues to manage. But there will be other sites, like for instance, if you were in Arid West, where there's no water in the mine is dry. And now you're going to be bringing water there and trying to keep it in the mine rather than trying to keep extra water out of the mine facility. But just like a surface plant there would evaporate and lose water and need replacement water because of evaporation, there's all these trade-off cost balances. Yeah, I don't know if that really addresses the question. It is complicated. As I said, we are good at treating mine water. The EPA just a few years ago approved discharges from the Berkeley pit in Montana back into the water system, right? We can treat water to acceptable levels. It's just a question of who will pay for it. That's the body of water, by the way, that killed the flock of migrating geese, where they all landed on it and they all died because it was so incredibly toxic. We can do that treatment. It's a question of, will it pencil out for the project? And then do the stakeholder communities have confidence that it will actually be done that way, right? That there will not be accidents.
okay. Last part, when it didn't go through, the engineering company asked them why it didn't go through. They said Marcellus gas turbines killed the spread. Is that correct?
Oh,
At the time?
yeah.
Because now they just turn on, instead of going to the grid
Yeah.
and buying electricity expensive, they just
Right.
turn on a turbine.
Again, if you're not a energy wonk, right? The idea of the way we solved this problem in those decades between pumped hydro storage build out in the 1950s and today is that we built peaker plants. And those peaker plants are generally often natural gas powered. They're built so that the turbine can power up, burn natural gas, pump juice out into the system, and then shut down. And then it sits for like 12 hours and does nothing, and then punches up again, right? It is a carbon disaster and financially not wise. But yet, it's an acceptable technical solution that has served our system in the past, and we could choose to do that as a society. That's a policy conversation, right?
Last question of the day. Anyone? Time to go. Yes, it might well be. Thomas, it's late where you are. We thank you for that. Thank you for staying with us.
Well, thanks a lot. It was my pleasure to participate. I'm really sorry for not being able to